Greetings and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Sliders Review. And I'm here today to talk to you about Extreme Ghostbusters. This show came out in 1997 and it only lasted for one season and only 40 episodes. It was a syndicated show. Many people have heard of this. Some people have never heard of it. Some people have never seen it. And others have simply forgotten about this show. But this show is amazing in my opinion. I actually watched this show in full about like a decade ago. But I was very familiar with it back in 97. See, back in those days, I was in high school, and I remember, like, I got up, whenever I would get up in the morning for school, I would, like, turn the television on. And around this time, I think that one fitness show with that one woman on PBS was no longer on. So I needed something new to watch. And so I wasn't really allowed to watch television in the morning, like when I was in, like, say, elementary and middle school, but in high school I was allowed to in the mornings and stuff. And as I'm flipping through the channels, I come across something called Extreme Ghostbusters. And like as I like watched the intro and saw like the art style and everything, I just didn't like it at first. Like, I didn't like the art style. I thought it was kind of grungy, kind of ugly looking. I didn't know why it was called Extreme Ghostbusters. And I just wasn't feeling it all because of the look of the show. And I truly regret it. Because now, as I'm older, I have a fondness and appreciation, and I like the art style now. And after watching this series in full, after taking a chance on it, I really enjoy it and stuff. Like, it's better than the real Ghostbusters. Yes, I said that. But, like, you have to remember, like, the real Ghostbusters that came out in, like, 1986 and lasted all the way to 1991 for like a total of like 7 seasons. It was geared more towards kids. There was a lot more humor in it and like just overall silliness because it was literally geared to kids and mostly just kids only, based on like the movie. And I remember as a kid, I used to love watching the real Ghostbusters. You know, that was my jam back in the day. But I remember after watching Extreme Ghostbusters, I went back and tried to watch the real Ghostbusters. I could not get past the first episode. I'm gonna try again. That's only because I'm older now and it's a little too silly. But you know, it was perfect for like a kid of that time. And, you know, I really loved and appreciated the real Ghostbusters back in the day. But then I remember about a 4th season, they changed up like their intro and they started calling it Slimer in the real Ghostbusters. And the format had changed a lot to incorporate Slimer in it a whole lot more. Also, there was other changes going around, like some of the voice cast had changed. Janine's look had changed and everything, and her voice. And, you know, and the show started to go a little bit downhill. I remember back in the day, it was on ABC. And so, Extreme Ghostbusters is a true, legit sequel to that of that old, like, 1986 show. Very rare for, like, a sequel series to pick up where something left off on. It was one of the first shows to ever do that. Probably the second, because You know, there was Batman the animated series, Superman, Justice League, Batman Beyond. Batman Beyond is a true direct sequel to Batman the animated series, while the others are more like spin-offs and stuff. So, I think Batman Beyond came out in 98, if I'm not mistaken. So, the Ghostbusters thing might actually be like the first to do it. And I remember, like I said before, it was in syndication, and it came on really early in the morning for me, at least, when I was getting ready for school. So I couldn't just sit there and watch it. So I just passed it up because, like, it just came on at the worst possible time. Why would you show it during the morning of a weekday? It would have been best to come on in the afternoon, which for some people it did come on in the afternoon, but for me it didn't. Now, at one point, this was on Toon Disney and stuff, and the only way you could watch it was like really bad uploads on YouTube. Now, however, on the YouTube official channel, they have the real Ghostbusters and the stream Ghostbusters in HD. This has also been released on DVD a couple of times and VHS. I own it on DVD. Personally, I don't like the binding. I hate when you have to put one DVD on top of another. I don't like that because you can scratch it. But like, this is also, I think, like on Roku TV, maybe Tubi, but it's also free on YouTube. And the reason why this show was even created is because the people that worked on the real Ghostbusters worked on this series, and they wanted to revive the franchise. Sadly, that did not happen at that time. We wouldn't get a new Ghostbusters anything until around 2015 with the female-led Ghostbusters, which bombed at the box office, and then they rebooted it again in like the 2020s and stuff. It makes you wonder if this would have revived like the movie series, if this show was successful. Personally, I like this show. It's darker, it's edgier, it's episodic, so you don't have to go back and catch up on the other episode to find out what the heck is going on. And it is a nice continuation of the original. However, you do stop and ask yourself, well, where are the original Ghostbusters at? Only 3 of the characters from the main show appear in this. Egon, Janine, and Slimer. They're the only ones that return. And for the most part, they have a pretty cool role in here. Slimer is still just Slimer, being like, eating a lot and helping out the Ghostbusters and being all cute and adorable and stuff. Janine is still the receptionist. Pretty much she pays all the bills, answers the phone, blah, 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 blah. They can't live without her type thing. And she crushes on Egon. Egon is the mentor. He's there in the capacity of like old Bruce Wayne in Batman Return. He's there to help them figure out how to like solve like a problem with like a ghost. Every once in a blue moon, he will suit up and go out in the field, but he's older now and his body just can't keep up. And I'm totally okay with that, you know what I'm saying? Now, of course, they do have redesigns from that of the original series. I'll get into that a little bit later. Well, actually, I'll get into that a little bit now. So basically, I'll get into that a little bit later. But this show had poor ratings and stuff. And in fact, like, I think the showrunners of the show pretty much blamed it on like the marketing and the scheduling conflicts because like I said before, this came on really early in the morning when I was getting ready for school. So it had to be around 7, maybe 8 in the morning or something like that. And by that time, little kids are already in elementary and stuff, and and middle school and stuff like that, depending on what time they go. And some other people caught it in the afternoon, but they were still either in school or on the bus trying to make it home. So it's kind of like if you don't know this show exists, how are you supposed to watch it? You know what I'm saying? Now they did have merch, which I did not know even existed. I didn't go to the stores back in the day. I didn't start going to the store until I was an adult. And everything. I just used to stay home as a teenager and everything. But yeah, they had merch, and the merch looks pretty much close to that of the cartoon. And you know how it is, merch sell doesn't sell, then the show also gets canceled. And so I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of this company, but Bart or something like that, Kids Network, they are the ones who funded this syndicated show. And like in some areas, this show is called like Ghostbusters Dark. So Jeff Clean and Richard Raynez are the showrunners of this show. And the show went through a lot of incarnations before they finally settled on the final project. Originally, the Ghostbusters, the new ones, because it's like a new group of teens, adults that are like 18, 19 years old who take up the mantle and everything. Originally, they were supposed to be all female except for Iguado and everything. But then they later decided to turn the guys or the girls into men, with Kylie being the only female. And I mean, they went through a lot of changes. They went through a lot of changes. Originally, it was supposed to be Janine, who was supposed to be a college professor, and the new group of Ghostbusters were her students. And Egon was just a bearded man in a robe and just like trying to get rid of computer viruses and stuff. But then they later changed it to where it's Egon is the college professor and those are his students, which makes a heck of a lot more sense because he's highly intelligent and stuff. Slimer had like a goblin sidekick named Nat or Gat, which that would have been stupid and didn't make no sense. I'm glad they kept Slimer the way they did. And as you can tell, Slimer has a redesign from his real Ghostbuster days. In the real Ghostbusters, he looked more like the Slimer from the movie. Big, blobby, kind of mean looking, ugly looking, and like these yellow type eyes. They redesigned him to make him slimmer, shorter, more cutesy wootsy, and really giant bottom teeth and different color eyes. The show was originally called like Super Ghostbusters. Garrett, who originally was a female, was named Lucy, and instead of a wheelchair, she had crutches. Roland was named Julia and everything. And like Garrett was later changed to Lucas before they settled on the name of Garrett. And so like Roland was supposed to be like the gentle, like clumsy type, like the big giant, gentle, clumsy type and everything. And it's just kind of weird how you know, they was originally females and stuff. Now, of course, this concept would be later used for the all-female Ghostbusters and new recruits that are younger would be in the 2020 movies and stuff. Igualdo, yeah, Eduardo, I can't say his name. Like, he was supposed to be like an Olympic hopeful and everything, wanting to run. And so it's just kind of odd, you know what I'm saying? Like all the like weird changes that was like made, but I do like the changes for the better. Like, even though I would like to have another female on the team, it really does make Kylie stand out. Speaking of which, IDW Comics, who now create the Ninja Turtle comics, they have like a bunch of Ghostbuster comic books, right? And the original cast is all there. Ironically, when it comes to Extreme Ghostbusters, only Kylie is in the comics. They didn't put the guys in there for some reason, and I'm not sure why. I guess maybe because she's the most popular and stuff, so that could be like a reason. Now, one thing about the art style, like I said before, I did not like it in the beginning, but I love it now. And the art style is actually reminiscent and identical to that of Men in Black and Jumanji from their cartoon series and stuff. Now, the art style is drastically different from that of like the real Ghostbusters. Back then in the 80s, I talked about this before how like in the 80s they was all about like surrealism, like realistic looking people and stuff like that. And then when you get towards like the mid 90s, that's when things started to come a little bit streamlined to where it was still realistic, but not too realistic. And then in the late 90s and early 2000s, you get more of a generic cartoon looking body and face where it's very, very streamlined and not very realistic. So, like, when they did this series, as you can tell, like, the drastic change of like people's appearance and face, like Egon, like his hair isn't as like poofy and curly like it was in the 80s. He still has the ponytail, but he looks more like a normal looking hairstyle for like a cartoon character. And he's a bit older looking in the face, but it's weird. When you, like, the original Ghostbusters do come back in the last two episodes, and everybody looks like they look more older in the 80s than they did like in the 90s, but like they still have that appearance of an older look. Janine, this is like her like third like incarnation, because in the original series she had like two main looks and everything. A softer look as the series was in the towards the end in the middle, and she got redesigned here, a more casual like librarian type look. And then of course there are the other like three original Ghostbusters, and their looks are more streamlined and made to look a bit older and stuff. Somebody should have been bald, but they wasn't and stuff. With the redesign, of course, you gotta like upgrade the weapons and stuff. The what is it, PKE meter reader and stuff like that. That's redesigned now. It was very archaic back in the 80s. And the stuff in the 80s looked like you can literally just go to like out the trash can or like a garbage dumping place and like pick up a bunch of parts and just make it yourself. And the newer series, while you still have that do-it-yourself look, it's a bit more streamlined, it's a bit more polished, not Star Trek looking, but it looks more upgraded. The blasters look weird. They're more bulkier this time. Like the proton blasters and stuff, they're way more bulkier. And I don't know, they look more like the do-it-yourself type of thing, which is kind of cool because you don't want it to look Star Trek. You don't want it to look smooth and shiny, and government looking. You want it a do-it-yourself kind of look. Now, Kylie is the only one who uses a proton pistol. However, the only thing that's very Star Trek looking is the new Ghost Trap. The new Ghost Trap is no longer a rectangular box with like this thing that you stomp on to open it up. Now it's this round, shiny, oval shaped type thing that attaches to the back of her back. And she whips it out kind of like a grapple, holding on to like the handle. Ecto 1 makes a return, and it's no longer white. Now it's kind of like a cream shade kind of color. I really love the blast effect from the proton blasters. Like there's like three different like filters they use. It's the normal setting and or animation, and then it has like this green filter, a bright filter, some type of neon filter. It's really spectacular and really sets it apart from the original. Problem is, now that I'm older and in my 40s, it hurts to watch it at night. It is so bright, but it's so amazing when you see it. Now, one thing I love with the animation is like when they're out at night, all the humans have like this silhouette look to them, and everything else is kind of like dim and kind of moodier. I really love that. Like, you don't really see too many cartoons that would do that. The ghosts are like creepy looking. The ghosts are so like creepy and sometimes terrifying and disgusting. Like they really went out with the way the ghosts look, and it really helps set the tone, the more mature, edgier, gritty tone of this show. These aren't like the silly looking ghosts from like the 80s or anything like that. These ghosts have teeth to them. It's like if this was a real life show, then like live action, you would want the ghost to look like this because the animation style really complements the way the ghosts look. They're so disturbing looking. Like I remember one time, like there was like this clown, and I think he ate one of them. There's this one ghost that like sucked the bones dry from like the humans, and all it was like a meat sack and everything. There's this one ghost that like what is it? I think he had like these kind of bugs coming from his body and like his mouth. And then you do have some ghosts that look more human looking, but they have like a ghostly, monstrous, demonic look underneath. Then you have some that are more humanoid looking, more monstrous looking, demonic looking. No, it is disgusting, and I love it. Now, when it comes to this show, the intro is amazing, and it's sung by Jim Cummings, the voice of like Darkwing Duck and like Monterey Jack from Rescue Rangers. He takes over from that of Ray Parker Jr., and he does an amazing job. Now, the outro was just a bunch of creepy, spooky music that a lot of people say it haunts them till today. I guess it was too much for kids, so they changed it to have like Jim start singing again. The voice cast is like amazing, and these are all stars that I've heard before, except for two of them. And so Garrett is played by James Martison, and I remember him from like Step by Step in live action. He was the voice of Peter Pan and Peter Pan and the Pirates, Impulse from Young Justice. And so Garrett is the only character to be in a wheelchair. He is paraplegic. He was born that way, but he doesn't let that stop him. He reminds me of Joe from Family Guy. It's like no matter what, he's always, the first person willing to kick some butt. He's very sarcastic and makes a lot of the jokes. And he cannot stand Iguodaro. And so, but his fearlessness, like the dude is tough. He's a jock. He's an athlete. He plays basketball. He went racing down the street with Kylie to see who's like faster. Like he will bust open doors with the back of his wheelchair. He will not let nothing stop him, despite having a disability and stuff. And he never complains about it either. And I really like that from him, like he's very strong mind and very strong willed. And I remember one time he reunited with an old friend of his, and his old friend hung out with some like two bad guys that were racist. and they wanted him to join them on something. And so, like, he literally parachuted off the top of a building in a wheelchair. Like, the dude has no limits and stuff. Now, they did give him a love interest in one episode. There's like these mole people. They're not real moles, they're just people who live underground. And so there's like this demonic ghost that like was messing up the electricity in the city. So they blamed it on the mole people and blamed it on the one girl's father. And so him and her went on like a date. He even went to her father's trial. And of course, they stopped the ghost and they spoke on his behalf, and her dad got released. Sadly, she did not stay with him because her father is old, ill, and dying. But, like, you know, the dude is very, 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 like, sarcastic. But the one thing that's really interesting is like the show won an award because of Garrett being in a wheelchair. Some type of LA disability something. I can't remember the name of it. And they won a award for that, you know, and that's like really cool because everybody deserves to be like, you know, represented and shown like on television. Because remember when originally he was going to be like a girl, they were going to have him in crutches. The wheelchair fits him a whole lot better. And like, he's also like, you know, afraid of like claustrophobia. But like, dude is very sarcastic. But like I said before, he's fearless. He's not gonna like let nothing stop him and stuff. Now he will make the occasional jokes if like say they get hit by something and they go crashing down, he'll be all like, my legs, I can't feel my legs. Knowing that he's never been able to feel them. He's actually born paraplegic and stuff. And like he's really like one of the only two like new cast members who wears a traditional uniform. Ed Grado. So he's voiced by Reno Romano. And I remember this dude, he's voiced Spider-Man, Spider-Man Unlimited, Batman and the Batman, Tuxedo Mask, and Sailor Moon. And so he plays a Hispanic character, and sadly, he's a stereotype. They got him as kind of like lazy, cowardly, the ladies' man, always hitting on women. He has kind of like this huge crush on Kylie, but she doesn't like him back. He's like the sleazeball. He has like a trigger temper and everything, which Garrett was actually supposed to be the one to have the temper. And so like they just got all these like racial stereotypes in him, which the original Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters, ABC hired this company like Q5 to flesh out the characters, but they made them into like racial stereotypes, especially Winston, who was always the driver, and they called him like the hands. But Igualdo, like he has, like I said before, a hair temper. Him and Slimer cannot get along. He's always wanting to fight like Slimer, and because Slimer's always like sliming him and stuff. And but then there's this one episode where he literally goes into the netherworld after Slimer, because Slimer literally sacrificed himself to make Igualdo like happy, to show like, hey, I'm not just the person who's always eating the food and getting on your nerves. I can actually contribute in everything. And so he actually went in there to find the dude and everything because he felt like bad. He's constantly hitting on like Kylie, and she cannot stand him. He's not very intelligent, but his catchphrase is that he's always calling himself and the other Ghostbusters scientists. Like, because the town people don't really like the Ghostbusters. And he's all like, we're scientists and everything. And like, you know, it makes him feel like smarter. Now, he's supposed to be like 18, 19, but the dude looks like he's in his 30s and stuff. Now it's revealed he has an older brother who's a cop, and him and his brother do not get along to the point where he literally hasn't seen his nephew in years, despite living like close to next to him and stuff. And it's a really interesting episode because him and his brother literally just don't get along, and his brother's a cop who hates the Ghostbusters because he feels like cops should be like stopping the ghosts and not the Ghostbusters and stuff. And that the Ghostbusters just cause like a lot of problems in the city when they destroy stuff. Now he also has another catchphrase where he refers to the ghosts as ghoulies and everything. And like I said before, like other than fighting with Slimer, he typically fights with that of like Garrett. Now, Ed Grotto, his uniform is odd. Like, I don't get it. He wears like a green shirt and like a vest over it, and it has the patch of the Ghostbusters logo on like the sleeves of his shirt. You think those are his regular clothes, but they're not. Somehow this uniform just works on him. Like, I don't know why, but it just does. Roland, he is voiced, and I couldn't believe this when I like heard his voice, like Ribeiro, the dude who played Carlton Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He's now like the host of America's Funny Videos and Dancing with the Stars. Ironically, he's all like Fresh Prince ruined his acting career because people can't stop thinking of him as Carlton and stuff. Now, interestingly enough, Roland is kind of based on both Carlton and Alfonso a little bit. Because like, okay, Carlton was like really, really smart. And Roland is like the brains, the engineer brains, that is. He's really good with science. He's really good at creating stuff. He's always repairing that of Ecto 1. And like, he's a highly intelligent character. And he wants to be like an Ivy League type person. And he also has a little brother who got kidnapped by Grundle, who also kidnapped that of Kylie's friend Jack. And so the thing about him that's like also similar to Roberto is that it's funny because like there's an episode where like the gang is trying to like hook him up with like a girl and see what his type. When this black lady passes by, one of the guys is all like, "Oh, that's your type right there." But then somebody else is like, "Nah, that's his type right there, a white lady." And Alfonso happens to be married to a white lady. And no, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm all for interracial relationships. But it's interesting because Alfonso said that he's all for the snow bunnies. And many people feel like that he doesn't like his black side, that he's too much like Carlton, a black man who acts like a white dude. But I do like the fact that Roland is not like a stereotype like black dude. He's highly intelligent. He thinks things out. He's very calm in nature. He rarely gets like upset. One of my favorite episodes with him, well, actually, there was two. He was trying to teach himself like violin, and then it happens to be like a banshee type episode and a siren episode where a banshee and a siren are like sisters and stuff. Also, like he ends up falling in love with the siren only because of her siren call. But then one of my favorite episodes is an episode where the new team is like on vacation. They're out in the countryside. They're in a town they've never been in before. They don't have none of their gear. And there's a giant ghost. So they have to use their wits and non like electrical devices to take on this ghost. And they have to use more like conventional methods. They find out the monsters allergic to like metal or something like that. So him and this historian, they figure out a way to stop this beast, and he's front and center trying to stop this thing. A man who relies on technology can no longer rely on it, so he has to become he has to adapt in a very primitive type of way. Now, interestingly enough, just like with Winston, he's always driving Ecto 1. But they don't call him the Hands, thank God. Now, this whole black person driving around white people thing is something very chauffeurish. Like, the driving Miss Daisy thing. Like, a lot of people don't like that in the black community. But Alfonso did a really amazing job as voice acting. I didn't know like he was a voice actor at times. Roland is the only other like Ghostbuster who wears a traditional uniform. Now, I was really shocked and surprised they added a racist episode in the series very early on, where Roland is trying to greet himself to that of like Garrett's old friend and his old friend's new friends. They will not shake his hand. And he's literally said, he's been there before, having people do that to him. And I was really shocked that they added this in. Now, of course, if it was getting made today, people would be like, that's woke and everything. How dare you share like a black story? Stop telling like cultural stories and everything and just tell like a story. Telling the truth right here, right now, that's exactly what they would say. They will huff, they will puff, and put their hands on their hips. Last on the new list is Kylie. She's a goth girl, but she's not your stereotypical goth girl. But she does have the best understanding of the supernatural world. Where Roland is smart with the engineering type stuff and electrical stuff, she is book smart. And she studies a lot about the paranormal. She's Egon's best student when it comes to that. And like, I really like that about her. Like, she like her and Roland are the other than Egon are the two main people who can figure out how to stop a ghost. He knows how to fix it on like Egon and Roland know how to like stop them on like, the technological side, where she knows how to stop them on the supernatural side. So she's always figuring out like a way. She's very tough and very independent. She normally tells the guys to like shut up a lot when they're acting like idiots and everything. And she cannot stand Eduardo. I can't say his name. Like he's always constantly hitting on her. It's kind of a will they, won't they thing, but mostly it's one-sided. And so she's always having to like push aside his advances and stuff. She does have a cat, and I forgot her cat's name. But one thing early on they did in like, this show was acknowledge she has a grandmother named Rose, and like she passed away a year prior, which really hurts her, especially when there's like a ghost, I think, that's trying to like resurrect her or something like that. There's also a time travel episode where she gets flung into the future, and like there's a new group of Ghostbusters who are like this rag team of like resistance fighters, because ghosts have now taken over the world. And every Ghostbuster is famous except for Garrett, which makes you think, does he die early on? And so they had to find a way to like, send her back through time and everything. She's the only Ghostbuster to have like proton pistols as opposed to a proton blaster. And like, of course, the pistols will later be used in the all-female like Ghostbusters. She's also the only one who carries a ghost trap on her, and she carries it on her back. Now, interestingly enough, her hair kind of changes color. Sometimes it looks black, sometimes it looks blue, but it's pretty wild and everything. Also, her uniform is weird. She wears like spandex, like tank top and shorts with like a bunch of pads. Like she has not ankle, but knee and like elbow pads. But she wears that of like sports pad gear, like hockey pads, football pads, and they're orange. I don't know why exactly she wears this, but it does kind of fit the whole extreme look, you know? And like I said before, she is the only one to appear in the IDW comics. She also has a strong Brooklyn accent. And ironically, she's voiced by Canadian actress Tara Strong. Now, Tara Strong has been in everything. She was Batgirl, she's Harley Quinn, she's Timmy Turner. The woman is legendary. She was Bubbles in the Powerpuff Girls. Slimer, this time voiced by Billy West. But he sounds exactly the same way the original one did in the real Ghostbusters. So he lives with Egon at the fire station. And him and Egon are very close. Like I said before, he doesn't like Eduardo and stuff. He's still the typical Slimer. He's always eating everything. And just like I said before, he has a redesign to make him more cuter and cuddlier and stuff, but also ghoulish and stuff. I like his redesign. I hated his old design. He like the dude is constantly eating everything. And he's really sweet and really nice. One thing I was always confused about, because I watched the real Ghostbusters before I ever watched the movie. And in the movie, he's like evil and stuff. But in the cartoon, see, this is what normally happens. Whenever a cartoon is based on a movie of like the 80s and the 90s, they always make the evil monster thing like the sidekick best friend to whoever the human is. It happened in Beetlejuice. It happened in Little Shop of Horrors. It even happened in The Killer Tomatoes and stuff. And so he is just like their friend, their confidant. You know, he's really sweet. He doesn't try to get on nobody's nerves, but he always ends up getting on people's nerves because he's always sliming stuff and eating their food. He's always eating Garrett's food, so sometimes they have a riff. There's one episode, everybody has like 2 episodes that are like solo episodes. And in one of his, he's getting on everybody's nerves. So he accidentally gets infected by this other ghost and constantly eating stuff. But the thing about Slimer is Slimer's no slouch. He will fight back and he will throw down. That monster that has to like eat like what other people are eating, in order to defeat him, they had to overload him, like make him really stuffed. So when the ghost started to suck out like, you know, the food from Slimer and realized, hey, this is killing me, Slimer went gun ho, man. He just went, grabbed that dude's mouth, opened it up, and let that dude absorb all his food and made the dude like explode. But then there's that episode where Eduardo was really pissed at him. And Slimer felt like really bad. He realized he was goofing up. So he was going to make it up to everybody by trying to fight like the bad guys, but then realizing that the only way to put the bad guy away is to put him in a trap. So Slimer literally goes into like the netherworld in the giant machine and sacrifices himself. That's how much he's willing to make amends with people and stuff, that he's willing to sacrifice his life and be in the realm of ghosts, knowing they hate him to death, because he works alongside the humans, and he's also responsible for putting some of them in there, and that's like a giant prison to them, being back in their home dimension and stuff. And so he's like fleeing from his life, and Eduardo goes down there to try to rescue him. He even whooped the snot out of this one ghost when like Garrett and Eduardo had their bodies possessed by like a ghost. And Slimer had his body possessed, which is weird, a ghost possessing another ghost. But he realized they had to go through like the mirror and back into the real world. So he literally just slugged this one ghost, grabbed the two dudes' souls, and like fled and everything. Now, when it comes to Slimer, nobody can understand what he says, not even the audience. Only Egon can, because they spent so much time together. Janine, voiced by Pat Music. And so, like, This is the third Janine voice actress and the third look. She's the only original member not to have the original voice actresses come back. Janine is really sweet, really nice, but she doesn't really do much in the show. She barely appears. Like, she's the receptionist, like I said before. She has a massive crush on Egon, but Egon is too much into science to realize that she likes him. And then sometimes when he does realize it, he's just not interested, which really frustrates her and stuff. There's one episode where like there's this ghost who's pretending to be a woman and doing everything that she does is like a temp because she was on like vacation, and she comes back and she's extremely jealous. Every once in a blue moon, like there's only been 2 times where she will suit up and go into the field. Personally, I love it when she suits up and goes into the field. I wish she could have been like, more active in the show, but sadly she was not. And she just comes off as just that female lonely character who's always pining for like a man. And she's a receptionist to like add insult to injury when it comes, because it's okay to be one, but it's like that's normally what they used to always make women back in the day. And then there is the man himself, Egon Spangler, who's always one of my favorite characters. I always like those brainy characters. The original voice actor comes back, Maurice LaMachine or something like that. I'm not sure how to say his name. The dude who was like, Brain from Pinky and the Brain. So when he did the Egon voice back in the 80s, they told him don't imitate like the original actor, but he just did it anyways. It just came naturally to him. And I'm so glad he did. Like, he has that really cool voice for Egon. And he's the only person never to be recast. Him and Frank were the only two originals back in like the day. And so Egon, he's a college professor now. And him and the old Ghostbusters are retired because they've captured so many ghosts that the city is literally safe. And so with his new students and everything, they're pretty like wild to find out that their college professor is the Egon Spangler, their original Ghostbuster. Well, of course, ghosts start popping up again, and his students end up becoming the brand new Ghostbusters. With a brand new bunch of equipment and everything. They get like Echo, what's that thing called? Not Echo, but Ecto one, like, running again and everything. And so he's their mentor, he's their leader. But he rarely goes out into the field and, fight ghosts. But once in a couple of episodes, he will go back and like fight them. And he doesn't let his age stop him, except for that one episode where they really wanted to put on the, hey dude, you're old now and you can barely do anything. I really hate episodes like that, but I guess it was a way to explain like why he's not in every episode fighting ghosts and stuff. One of his old colleagues end up like, working with like a ghost and like betraying him and stuff. And they even make mention of how Egon once went inside the netherworld through like the machine. Egon is very much like a Spock or like a Commander Data, even to the point where Janine constantly keeps hitting on him. But he's so much into science, he doesn't realize it and stuff. Now, when he goes out into the field, he puts on like, a traditional Ghostbuster uniform and everything. And he's really excited when his old friends come to visit him for his birthday. Yes, the trio return. That of Ray, Winston, and Peter return to like the last two episodes. Now, the last two episodes are not like a continuation. It's not like one big finale. It's just two separate episodes with two separate ghost entities. I wish it could have been like the big blowout, like, collaboration between the old cast and the new cast and like a full episode, like hour long episode, but it wasn't, but it's still good enough. And it was really cool to see like the old team and the new team unite and the original voice actors come back. Well, the ones that were the replacements, that is, you know. And they all have like new redesigns to make them look older and to adhere to the new art style. And so you have Peter, who's voiced by David Coulier, I think that's his name, the dude who played Joey on Full House. Now, he was the replacement, and he's like the goofy one, and he looks a little bit like two of the other characters. Basically, he's been trying to make a movie deal out of their lives. All of their lives have not gone the way they wanted to. Winston is voiced by Buster Jones, and he replaced Arsenio Hall after the first two seasons. Sadly, Buster has like passed away. May he rest in peace. I'm not sure what he's doing in his old age, the character. Frank Welker, famous voice actor, voices Ray again. And like he never replaced anybody in the original. However, he was the original voice of Slimer. So I don't know why he didn't come back for this series. And he's a teacher or a professor at like a college. And so when the guys show up for like Egon's birthday and everything, at first the new team is like really excited. They're happy to see these legends and stuff. But they become quickly annoyed when the older characters start calling them like kids and sweetie and son and youngster and stuff like that. They feel like they're a bunch of babies and everything, and that's how the older characters treat them. But they are only 18, so I don't know why they're getting so bent out of shape. And so the old guys want to get literally back in the saddle. That's the name of the episode, which they come back in. And they want to have one more hurrah as like fighting ghosts. They're kind of going through a midlife crisis because like it doesn't go too deep into it because it's a kid's cartoon after all. But like, fighting ghosts was some of the best times they had. So they put on their old uniforms, which, they've gained weight, and they whip out their original blasters and stuff. Well, no, actually, they don't have their original blasters yet. They're using the newer blasters, which newer blasters are more powerful than theirs. They basically say it's like a tiny nuke reactor in each like proton pack. So they're not used to it and they get like thrown back. But they do eventually defeat like, the monster. And they keep trying to give pointers to the younger, newer team and everything. Like there's this one type of ghost where they're like, hey, you need to recalibrate like your blaster and then recalibrate it back. But the new team doesn't want to listen to them and end up screwing up. And so like the new team gets so irritated and jealous, they quit and everything and go back to their normal lives. And so after a while, the older team is fighting like, a ghost, but they are having a bit of a problem. This ghost keeps replicating itself every time it gets blasted. So like the new team comes back to save that of the old team. They all reconcile and fight as a unit. After they destroy those ghosts in the next episode, it's like a giant cloud type ghost monster thing, which is really hard to defeat. But basically Egon and like, Roland, they make like a giant cannon and a giant trap to trap this thing. Basically it just ends with them all getting along, and we're led to believe they go about their separate ways. continuing life doing whatever it is they're doing. Maybe they're still Ghostbusters, maybe they're not, because the series ended. But yeah, this was like a really amazing show that should have never ever got canceled as soon as it did. I still believe it's better than the real Ghostbusters. This show had like a little bit of depth, it had a little bit of grit, it had some edginess to it, it had some humor. It was a mature show for a mature audience that grew up with the original real Ghostbusters cartoon. And, they should have marketed this better. They should have put it in a time slot where everybody could watch it. Now, it being on syndicated really doesn't matter because people watch syndicated stuff. But a lot of syndicated shows, when you don't know they're around, tend to get canceled very quickly. So it would have benefited better if it was on like a major network, especially Fox Kids around that time or Kids WB. Now, wasn't that spooky? All right, well, I shall talk to y'all later. Bye.